Welcome to the Budget Mom YouTube channel. I'm Kamiko Love from thebudgetmom.com, and today we're doing another real life budget. And today we're going to be talking about Sarah's budgeting information. Now, Sarah's situation is a little bit different. She has no debt. And she also is transitioning from a monthly pay schedule to a weekly pay schedule. I thought it would be interesting to note too that when I first looked at Sarah's information, the first question I had was, why does she want me to go over her budgeting information? It looks like she's really on top of it. It's very simplified. It's very well organized. There's a plan for everything. So I was a little bit confused on why Sarah wanted me to go over her budgeting information in the first place. With Sarah, one, she's having a hard time converting from a monthly paycheck to a weekly paycheck schedule. And she really does want to do really well at budgeting by paycheck. And anytime that schedule changes with your income, the transition takes a little bit of time to get used to. The next thing is she really wanted to hone in on where she is throwing her money because, in her words, she feels like she could be doing better with the dollars she has coming in. So those are a couple of reasons. And when I looked at her information, I'm like, aha, okay, I can get why she's sensing that, why she's feeling that. So today we're going to be going over Sarah's information. We're going to be going over her income as well as her different and many savings goals. So before we dive into all of the numbers and information, I wanted to give a little background information on Sarah's situation. So Sarah is a logistics coordinator, currently living in New York City, renting, no kids, not married, and she's also working on getting her master's degree. And she is paying for that master's degree without student loans. And that's part of her savings goals that she's working on every single paycheck or every single month. So let me show you Sarah's information inside of the Budget by Paycheck workbook. So this is the Budget by Paycheck method. A little bit ugly, but the first step in the Budget by Paycheck method is to find out your why, your purpose behind being on this financial journey. So let's look at Sarah's why. Sarah's why is her family. She says, I have friends and family that live all over the country. As someone whose love language is quality time, I value spending time with them in person. I want to be able to travel to see them as a way to stay close with them and experience new places without relying on debt or sacrificing too much else in my life. I love how Sarah mentioned her love language. And she knows that's quality time, and that's what's really, really important to her, and she values that. So that became part of her why. Now let's look a little bit at her backstory. Sarah's personal story is she is extremely lucky to be able to afford to live in a city that she loves, which is New York, and not be worried about debt. I'm also self-funding my graduate school. I'm on track to finish my degree in 2023. I want to be successful in my field and maybe one day start my own consulting business. Quality time with my family and friends is extremely important to me. It's important to me that I also use PTO from work to visit them or go on trips with my boyfriend. However, part of that is being able to afford to travel. I don't live very close to any of my family anymore, and I don't own a car. I would like to be able to afford to travel and one day get a car as well so that we can take even longer road trips if we want. Eventually, I would love to purchase a home with my boyfriend, and I know that if we stay in New York, that will be an expensive undertaking. I want to be confident enough to take that goal on. So that's a little of her personal story. You can see she's fighting for a lot of different things in her life. The ability to travel, the ability to stay in New York City and one day own a home, which to me seems like one of her big goals, owning a home in New York City and being able to spend that quality time with her friends and family that she loves and that she really values. So that's a little of her personal story. So let's look at the second step in the Budget by Paycheck method. That's tracking and categorizing your spending. Now, I'm assuming that all the members who send me their budgeting information have already done this because of all of the information that they give to me. They would have to do that step in order to send this information. So the next one is identifying your regular bills. So let's do that. First, let's look at her income. Her total monthly income is $3,957. Now that includes, she gets about $739 every week per paycheck every Wednesday. But she also has some other income coming in. Her brother currently reimburses her for a storage unit on the 16th. He gives $75. Her boyfriend reimburses her for cell phone and rent. So he pays $63 of the cell phone and $863, which is half of the rent. So that's her income. Paychecks plus what she's getting back for reimbursement from these people in her life. Let's look at her bills, her fixed expenses. These are currently all of Sarah's bills. She has rent, which is $1,725 that she splits with her boyfriend. She currently uses 2 different credit cards. She has credit cards in her life but doesn't have debt. She pays them off and uses them for very specific reasons. So on her Amex credit card, she uses it to charge Patreon, Zipcar, and iCloud. And then on her Bethpage credit card, she uses it to charge Twitch, Adobe, and Spotify. And then she pays those bills off before the interest hits, before the due date. She has a Roth IRA that she is contributing $100 a month towards. That's an investment. Storage unit that her brother pays for some of that. Coned, which is her utilities, is $100 every month, and then her cell phone. So all of her bills equal $2,287, and don't forget, 3 of those bills are being reimbursed from these people in her life. Not the full amount, but either half of it or some of it. The next thing in our budget by paycheck method is identifying our variable spending and determining what cash envelopes we want to use in our lives. So let's look at Sarah's variable expenses. Sarah mentioned she is cashless. Right now she is 100% cashless. She's using her debit card, but she does have spending limits when it comes to her variable spending. Home is $100, and I'm thinking this is more of like home essentials, so household items. Food is $300 a month, transportation is $50 a month, shopping is $100, pet is $150, date night is $60, and fun is $50. Now we know Sarah's getting paid weekly, and anytime I hear someone's pay schedule, I take their variable expenses and I divide it by the number of paychecks that they're going to be getting every single month. In Sarah's case, it's either going to be 4 or 5. 4 weeks out of the month most likely, but there are some months during the year that do have 5 weeks, like March. So the month that we're going to be showing the budget by paycheck method on for Sarah's information is actually happening during a month that she gets 5 paychecks, and I'll be showing you that here shortly. So in the red is us just breaking it down. I'm breaking it down into weekly amounts so I can see that information. The next thing is her budget calendar. Before we jump into the budget calendar, I do want to show her savings goals. Sarah has done an amazing job at establishing $5,000 for her emergency savings. She has completed this goal. This amount makes her feel comfortable for a fully funded emergency fund, $5,000. Now, I always say right now, especially with the circumstances that we're seeing right now, I always recommend 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. She does have a couple of bigger goals. She wants to save $600 for a pet emergency fund, which she's considering a short goal. It means she wants to fund that within the next 1 to 2 years, 1 year ideally. And then her car. She eventually wants to own a car, but it doesn't have to be immediate. This can be more of a medium to long-term goal. She wants $20,000 for that purchase. She's also working on some sinking funds. So sinking funds is where it gets a little bit muddy for Sarah. So she is currently saving money, enough money to pay her way through master's school, and each class costs something different. So right now, to date, she's already saved $3,339 towards completing that master's and doing it in cash. She's putting away about $150 a month for that goal. Next, the next big thing on her list is in July of this year, she has a trip to Scotland planned. But we all know with COVID, those plans can change. So she had a goal to save $3,000 for that. She currently already has saved $2,103. We're assuming that that trip is going to happen because we always want to be prepared. If she doesn't go on the trip, then at that time she can decide what to use for that money. But for now, we're assuming the plans are a go. So we have another 4 months to come to that $3,000 a month total. If we take what we still need to save and divide it by the 4 months, we have to do $225 a month for that. Some things that she doesn't have anything saved for that she would like for her sinking funds: Christmas, Comic-Con, Thanksgiving, clothing, and beauty. So I made sure to really look at these savings goals in her life when I was creating that paycheck budget. So let's look at the budget calendar. This is our budget calendar. And with this, you might see different colors for her paychecks, but not a lot of those colors on the calendar. Here's why. When we look at our budget calendar, for instance, she gets paid on the 3rd, and then she gets paid again on the 10th, and there's no bills that have to be paid for during that time frame for that paycheck. Now, Sarah did mention to me that she usually has and is spending or is allocating money for her variable spending in the beginning of the month because that's how she did it when she used to get paid once a month. That's totally fine to do, especially to utilize these paychecks where she doesn't have any other financial obligations to take care of that variable spending. So on the paycheck bill tracker, her budget, the one that she's receiving on 3/3, she's getting her paycheck. We have no bills, but we're taking care of most of her variable spending. The only one that we didn't have enough to fund was her shopping, which shopping is not an essential. So I said, hey, it's okay to give her a little bit in the beginning of this month and we'll fund it as we go throughout the month. That's what I'm choosing to do with her first paycheck of the month. On the 3rd is take care of those variable expenses. Now, when we get to her paycheck on the 10th, that's when we run in some bills we have to pay. We have to pay the Amex credit card, the Bethpage credit card, the investment contribution to her Roth, and that storage charge. Don't forget, she also gets reimbursed by her brother, and she gets reimbursed by her brother, and that happens every month on the 16th. So her income for this month is $814. Her bills equal $348. That gives us $466 left over. And I said, hey, we need to take care of that rest of that variable spending. So I finished out funding that for $71. That left us some extra income, $395, to put towards whatever else. So she doesn't have debt. So let's take care of some of those bigger sinking funds that she wants to fund. Remember, these are important. So I decided with the leftover money, we were gonna fund the tuition for $150, the Christmas for $112, $100 toward Thanksgiving, and any remaining money towards that, finishing out reaching that goal for Scotland. All of these expenses, all of this spending minus her income equals $0. Let's look at the paycheck on the 17th. She has one bill that she has to pay. Here is a big thing. With her paycheck on the 17th, we also need to keep in mind, because her income is broken down into such shorter amounts for these weekly paychecks, that rent payment that she has coming up on 4/1, we need to start taking care of that. We're gonna pull a little bit from each of these remaining paychecks to help cover rent. So we have that utilities expense here, and then also any other remaining money in this paycheck I'm throwing to rent. I wanna be able to say, hey, I'm prepared for this large expense as quickly as I can throughout the month. So I'm throwing everything I have towards that rent expense. So those are the only two things we're taking care of with the paycheck on the 17th. 3/24 is a little bit interesting too. She gets another paycheck here. Now, usually, most months, she's only going to receive 4 paychecks. And you'll see with this budget, it's totally fine if she doesn't get this paycheck on the 31st. And I'll show you that paycheck here in a minute. But on the 24th, she's taking care of the phone bill as well as the remaining of her rent. On the 24th, she's going to be able to say, okay, hey, it's a big expense, but I have the cash set aside for my half of the rent. I'm 100% prepared for that. The next is, if you take her bills and minus her income, she's left with $464. We're gonna start taking care of the rest of those sinking funds that she wanted to take care of. So we're throwing $192 towards the rest of that, finishes out our Scotland goal. Taking care of Comic-Con, taking care of clothing, taking care of beauty. That is all of her variable expenses that she wanted to reach. We're still left with $100 left over. So what do we do with it? Because Sarah doesn't have debt, we go to her number one priority savings goal outside of her sinking funds, which is her pet emergency. So we're gonna throw everything extra we have, which is $100, towards that pet emergency fund. Now let's take a look at the paycheck we're gonna receive on the 31st. This is our quote unquote extra paycheck. And I see so many of the time people do not plan out their budgets in advance. They get this paycheck and they say, oh, free money, extra paycheck. All my bills are paid, I don't have to use it for anything. But in Sarah's case, as we were planning out into March, you can see we planned out into March as well. So she receives $739. Her boyfriend reimburses her for that rent expense on the last day of every month. So we're also getting the $863 from him, which means we're taking care of the rest of the rent that we still owe. If you look at the way that we took care of rent for 4/1 on our calendar, you may notice that we have a different color dot for all these different amounts. Well, that's because it correlates to what paycheck we're using to cover that rent. For our yellow paycheck, which is here on the 17th, we're putting $639 towards that. The teal, we're doing $224, and then the paycheck on the 31st is her boyfriend's half that he's paying, and that's $863. So that's how I document on my budget calendar when multiple paychecks are covering one expense. I put the color of the paycheck and the amount that I'm putting towards that expense for each paycheck. But here's the thing with this last paycheck in March. It also is gonna cover any of our variable expenses up until our first paycheck in April, which isn't going to really happen until Wednesday the 7th. So she needs living expenses, things to live on for food, gas, whatever, up until the 7th. So I decided to repeat my process again, and just like we did with her first paycheck in March, we're gonna be covering those variable expenses for her using that last paycheck of the month. And this is what I mean. If you're planning out your paychecks in advance like this and you're able to put it on even just doing it on your budget calendars, you'll very quickly realize that, hey, that paycheck that we're getting, our 5th paycheck, isn't really, hey, just an extra paycheck. We're utilizing it to cover expenses in the new month. That way, we're not so tight in our paycheck budgets come April. So this is what and how I would organize Sarah's information using the Budget by Paycheck method. So let's talk about my recommendations and some of the things that I noticed looking at Sarah's information. The biggest thing that's popped out to me was Sarah saying, I know I could do more or I could do better. When I looked at Sarah's information, I go, geez, she can do everything she wants to accomplish. She has the income to fund her savings goals, her different sinking funds, her pet emergency, her car. She's covering her variable expenses. She's taking care of her bills. Everything is very simplified and everything has a great plan laid out for her dollars. I think the biggest question we have to ask is, why does she feel like she can do more? If she's accomplishing all of this, which this is wonderful, she has done a lot. I mean, she's funding her way through a master's degree. She's doing it without debt. She's sacrificing not having a car to do some of these different goals. So my thing is, there's something deeper that's going on here. There's a reason why Sarah might be asking herself, how can I do better? We're not filling something that should be filled here. We're not working towards something that I feel like that would bring more value to what she's doing with her money. Sure, she's accomplishing a lot of different sinking funds, a couple of different bigger goals, but it comes down, I think Sarah needs to ask, why does she feel like she can do more? And sometimes us just stepping back and asking ourselves that question puts things into perspective and gives us some different clarity around what we're doing with our money. To say you're truly successful with your money also depends on you feeling that confidence and feeling like you're being successful with your money. Sure, there are a couple of things that I could recommend. For instance, her variable spending. We could always say, hey, we could lower that shopping category, right? And the sinking fund for around shopping. We have a sinking fund for beauty, for clothing, as well as $100 shopping variable spending envelope, or in her case, variable spending category, because she doesn't use cash, that we could decrease. We could decrease that and save ourselves $100 a month. It all comes down to trade-offs. Do we want to decrease what we're spending in that shopping, our beauty, and our clothing, so we can use that dollars for something else, something that's more important? The whole goal here is to spend less on the things that don't matter to you and more on the things that do. But first we have to define what matters most. And in Sarah's case, she talked about traveling. Would we rather use $100 out of the beauty, clothing, and shopping category to put towards a travel fund, a future travel fund like I have? I have a vacation fund. It's not dedicated for a specific vacation. It's dedicated for, say, if I have a spontaneous road trip with my friends that come up, a baseball tournament with my boyfriend that he doesn't tell me about until a month before the trip. Gives me the ability to travel, but to do it unexpectedly. So there are some things, like I could definitely see decreasing that, but it's really hard for me to answer or to give a recommendation without knowing more on a specific level what Sarah feels she is missing. And I think those are some of the questions that need to be asked first. I think all of us, when we are working with a budget isn't just for the bills. It's just not about dictating what paychecks we're going to pay what expenses. A budget is defining the lifestyle that we are choosing to live, the joy and value of the things that we decide to have in our lives. So for now, I would think I would leave Sarah with that recommendation. Asking yourself, why do you feel like you could be doing more? When I'm from a person from the outside, a financial expert from the outside is looking at this saying, everything Sarah wants to do, she's doing. So that would be my first question and my first recommendation. If you found this video helpful, please like it and don't forget to subscribe. Okay, kitty, that's a no. No, just lays down. Rolling.
Yeah, I just wanted to move you. Go.